Chad's military leader Mahamat Idriss Deby Itno was declared the winner of Monday's presidential election. That's according to provisional results announced yesterday by the official electoral agency. They say he won the first round with 61% of the vote and that his top rival, Succès Masra, finished with 18%. But Masra contests those numbers and is also claiming victory. Well, France 24's Claire Paccalin was covering the election in Chad, and she joins me now in the studio. Claire, welcome back. The situation seems quite confused in Chad. Tell us what's been going on.
So what happened was, shortly before the official election agency announced the results, that was last night on Thursday evening, Succès Masra, who was sort of the second favourite, he was the top rival of the man who actually won, Mahamat Idriss Deby Itno, or Midi as he's known. Succès Masra went on to Facebook Live and told his supporters, "I've won in the first round. Do not let your destiny be stolen from you. Mobilize peacefully but firmly." He even told soldiers to refuse to obey unjust orders. Those were his words. Now, a little later on in the evening, we got the official results from the election agency saying 61% for the incumbent, the Midi as he's known, so Mahamat Idriss Deby Itno, and 18 for Succès Masra. So now what we're seeing is this confusing situation, and I need to give you a bit of context here. The fact that Succès Masra has called on his supporters to mobilise is something that's leading to fears of unrest, because we saw a year and a half ago, in October 2022, when Succès Masra's supporters went to the streets. They were unhappy about the situation. They felt that the president was clinging onto power for too long. There was a bloodbath in the streets of N'Djamena. We saw up to 300 people were killed. The exact numbers we do not know, unfortunately. And Succès Masra ended up in exile in the US. So certainly him telling his supporters to mobilise right now is leading to fears that there could be a second round of that kind of unrest.
Yeah, because these two men do have a history, right? Claire, tell us more about that.
Certainly. What I can just tell you about the situation this morning in N'Djamena is that people I've been speaking to on the ground say that it's calm. They haven't seen big mobilisation from Succès Masra's supporters. The streets are full with heavily armed soldiers. So one local journalist actually said to me, "Well, look, people don't want to go out and commit suicide. It's a dangerous thing to do to start mobilising right now." So at the moment, the streets are calm, but we have seen, because of celebratory fire last night after those election results were announced, which gave the win to Mahamat Idriss Deby Itno, the incumbent, there was celebratory fire and up to 9 people, we believe, were killed and 60 injured. So yes, it's calm on the streets to a certain extent, but it's still very tense. When it comes to these two men, they have been arch rivals. And what's very interesting is that we had Succès Masra, who was in exile in the US. Then he came back. He was fearing for his life. That's why he went to the US. He came back to Chad, signed a deal to be prime minister. So there was this funny situation where you had the president, who was also had his prime minister as an arch rival, and then the two ran against each other in the campaign. So it was a strange situation, but it did make for a very interesting campaign. A lot of Chadians told us that, look, it was kind of the first time that they could remember when they felt like there was a real campaign going on, a real election, and that both men were really trying to sort of fight for their votes.
So they were both fighting for it, but Mahamat Idriss Deby Itno, the incumbent, he was expected to win this election.
Right. So certainly, again, when you speak to people on the ground, no one really expected there to be a second round. They expected the incumbent, or Midi, as he's known, Mahamat Idriss Deby Itno, so that's his initials, Midi, to win. When you walk around the streets of N'Djamena, most of the campaign posters had his face on them. He also has the army behind him, and that's a very important thing in Chad. So, of course, we had some candidates crying foul. There were 10 candidates in the election, and most of the opposition candidates said it was an election that was weighted in favour of the incumbent. When you look at the official election agency, which was responsible for counting the votes and announcing the result, all of its members, the top members, were all appointed by the president. So, you kind of know who their boss is. Of course, that agency, and I met with them, they would deny that there was, a lack of transparency. They say this is a free and fair election. But what we can say was there was no big surprises when it came to this result. Of course, we have Succès Masra coming out and saying, actually, he was the one who won.
And Claire, you spent some time in Chad, going to these final rallies, speaking to people. What kind of things did people tell you about?
So I'd say, first of all, people wanted a transparent, free and fair election. And most of all, though, people want their lives to improve. It's incredible to think that even in the capital city, in N'Djamena, most people don't even have electricity and running water in their homes, even today. Young people can't find decent paying jobs. I met with a man called Cyril, who's in his 30s. He was at the market selling bits and bobs. He just had a sort of a bag. He was selling anything he could find. He studied law at university. He worked hard at school. He thought he had a future. Can't find a job, cannot find a decent paying job. And now he sells whatever he can find on the market. And I met with a youth worker there as well, Aimée, who told me she's in despair because she's working with young people all the time, trying to help them, give them guidance, help them at school, give them something to work for. But then they leave and there's just nothing there for them. And so it's a very difficult situation for many people in Chad. And what we saw in this election is that we saw Midi, so Mahamat Idriss Deby Itno, we saw Midi very much as the candidate for continuity. His father was the president for more than 30 years and he was killed when visiting troops on the battlefields, with Succès Masra being the candidate for change. The question now is, to what extent and what will be the outcome of Succès Masra's calls for mobilization?
Yeah, and hopefully the situation in the country will improve after that. We'll be following the situation in Chad, of course. Claire, thank you so much for that. That's France 24 reporter Claire Paccalin.